What's going on, guys? Today, Jagex released these new Slayer creatures here. You can see the Profane Scarabites. These monsters require level 87 Slayer to defeat, and they give you the Slayer helmet add-on for necromancy. So if you want to be boosting your necromancy damage on a Slayer task, definitely come here to defeat these creatures. They're fairly easy to kill. The requirements probably aren't super high if you want to do them at the lowest level, but in this video, we are going to be going over the best in slot, fastest kills per hour method to be getting upwards of like 800 kills per hour on task, maybe about 700 off task. So yeah, hopefully you guys like this type of video and you enjoy a new Slayer guide. So if you want to be getting a Profane Scarab task, the best Slayer Master to use is going to be Simona here in Polovnik. This Slayer Master has two tasks that count as the Profane Scarabs. There's just the normal Scarabite task, which only Simona has access to, as well as the Profane Scarabites. So if you want to be getting these tasks, I guess Simona is probably the best to use, although you don't get a lot of Slayer points, and the other tasks she gives are pretty bad, so you might be better off just using Lanikia with like a Slayer or a Slayer Master Cape, and then getting the task that way if you want to be getting points. But yeah, we can get a task here from Simona. She notices that I have my cape, luckily. And you can see here that we have this menu. You can see there's Profane Scarabites as well as these standard Scarabites here at the bottom. I would highly suggest picking these Profane Scarabites because they give you up to 100 or around 100 for your task. I think it's like 80 to 100, and the normal Scarabites are only like 50. So make sure you're picking the Profane Scarabites. You can see I got 116 here, so this is a pretty big task. You might want to extend these as well if you have the points, but I'm not going to because I don't want to waste my points. Getting to Profane Scarabites is pretty easy. The best teleport is going to be setting your house portal here to Polovnik, and then you just run over here to the cave of over here to the west, I guess. Another teleport that's pretty close is going to be using your Slayer Cape and then teleporting to Simona, and then that'll bring you fairly close as well. You can see we just have to run a little bit extra, but you don't have to like retune your house or anything. And then you just come over here, and then you go to the west again into this little cave entrance you can see they added here. And this is where the Profane Scarabites are. So the Profane Scarabites, as you can see, there are several locations where these things spawn. But unfortunately, due to the number of spawns at this bottom section here, you can see this bottom section has 9 spawns. This one down here has 5 spawns. I believe this one has 3, and then this other one over here above has 4 spawns. So if you want to be getting the most kills per hour, you pretty much have to be using this lower area with 9 spawns. You can attack all 9 of these at once, so it is a pretty big boost to your kills per hour. It probably like doubles them almost compared to this lower area with only 5 spawns. So if you want to be getting the most kills per hour, definitely make sure you're going here to this lower area with 9 spawns. Moving on to the preset. Before we get into the gear preset, you can see there are some things highlighted here that are extremely important for this method, and those are going to basically be poison protection. Profane Scarabs have an incredibly strong poison. It hits about 1,000 damage per hit, and it's mostly not sustainable if you don't have some sort of poison protection. So the poison protection I would recommend is going to be an Overload Salve. This should fully upkeep your poison protection, and you're pretty much using it anyway because you need overloads for this. But it is pretty expensive, so if you're not going to be using that, you can use something like the Venom Blood perk or Era Incense Sticks as well to be getting that poison protection. But just make sure you have some kind of poison protection because without it, you're probably going to have a bad time. So yeah, also I guess one thing to note is these things are automatically aggressive, and we're using a cannon anyway, so you don't really need to use aggression potions, so that makes perfect room for the Overload Salves to be used. For the familiar, we are using a Blood Reaver. These things are poisonable, so you might as well use a Reaver to just spam out that poison damage. For the gear setup, you can see we're going to start with Magic here. Magic, we use 4 pieces of Crypt Bloom. You really only need 3 pieces of Crypt Bloom and then just some piece of like magic tank armor. And then obviously we're using Animate Dead with this. But then we're just using some like Cinderbane gloves, you know, whatever ring you want. And then an Amulet of Souls. You can use an EOF, but it's kind of expensive, so I wouldn't really suggest that. We also are going to be using a Zuck Cape as well as the Wen Book for that poison and AoE spam. And then you can see we have the Penance Aura highlighted. You can use any aura with like Penance Powder, I guess, but the Penance Aura is pretty, it's free to use compared to the powder is pretty expensive to use. So I would just use the Penance Aura unless you really want to be maximizing your kills per hour, I guess. But one thing to note with magic is you probably do want to use Greater Chain with this method. You might even want to use something like Corroming 4 on your offhand or something like that if you want to be maximizing your kills per hour, but I find the kills per hour is pretty decent even without Corroming. You also are going to want to use Magma Tempest. It's really nice we don't need to use a staff anymore to use Magma Tempest, so it does become really good with the new dual wields. And I find these two upgrades give you about 50 or so kills per hour more, maybe even more than that, honestly. But it makes magic better than necromancy, which is really, really cool. But it is pretty expensive gear. I mean, Crypt Bloom plus all these upgrades, the tier 95s and stuff, are a lot of upgrades to be using magic. And I assume most people maybe don't have that. So we do have a necromancy setup below that as well, you can see. We pretty much just have the Raziel gear and then pretty much the same other upgrades there. And the necromancy setup is slightly less kills per hour, but it's pretty similar. I mean, I think you get about 650 off task, maybe like 750 or close to 800 on task, and magic gets like 700 off task and about 800 or so on task. So magic is slightly better, but yeah. You can also downgrade your necromancy gear. You could always use something like Death Warden or Death Dealer with the Darkness incantation if you want, if you don't have the Raziel gear, and tier 90s should work as well with that setup. So definitely keep those things in mind. If you don't have this gear, you can always downgrade a little bit. But moving on to the inventory, it's a pretty basic inventory. We just have, a Spring Cleaner, the Shard, Excalibur, some Cannonballs, the Slayer Cape to teleport to Simona to get there. And then we also have some incense sticks. Those are Lantidime and Quorum. Lantidime increases our overload and weapon poison timers, so it is more efficient to use that, less inputs. And then we also use Quorum to be doing more poison damage. And then we're using potion reservoirs with overload salves, like I said, and then just some weapon poison and a cannon. So pretty basic setup, as you can see. The gear requirements with necromancy can be fairly low, so definitely don't think that this is a hard requirement to have this stuff. But the magic setup, you might want to have some pretty high-end gear. And before we move on, I do want to talk a little bit about the magic setup here. Technically, these things are affected by the Inquisitor staff, but from what I noticed, if you're not on a Slayer task, it's better to use the tier 95s. Because with the Inquisitor staff, you get about 84% accuracy compared to about 90% off task with the tier 95s. You can mitigate this by using the Shadow Barrage, or maybe it's Smoke Barrage, whatever the Earth Barrage spell is. But most people probably aren't going to be wanting to change their spell all the time. So if you are using magic, definitely keep in mind like the accuracy that you're getting off task, because it's not 100%. So try to be maximizing using Exsanguinate and something like the Exsanguinate and tier 95s, or like the Shadow Barrage and Inquisitor or something like that. But yeah, that's really all there is about the preset. So finally, we're going to be going over the perks here. The perks are nothing crazy. I mean, it's just your standard best in slot PVMing perks on your gear. The only thing to note is you can use something like Corroming 4 if you want, like just some other offhand. I don't really think it's worth putting Corroming 4 on your tier 95 offhand, so it's probably better just to use the Ode to Deceit anyway. But you can use something like Corroming 4 if you do want. As for the relics again are just standard. We're using Fury of the Small, Conservation of Energy, and Persistent Rage, or Death Ward or whatever. So yeah, pretty much standard PVMing setup. One thing to note though is if you are using necromancy, you can switch out to the Ring of Death. This will help you get a little bit more optimal scythe casts, but again, it's probably not worth it if you don't have one to go and get one for this. But it is somewhat handy, I suppose. So for the magic setup, it's fairly basic. You can see the action bar we're using on screen here. All we do is we use Animate Dead, we use Soul Split and your damage boosting curse here, and then we come over here across this little bridge thing here to the area with 9 different spawns. And the trick for this method is going to be, obviously, we're going to use our overload and weapon poison here, turn on our book. And then the trick for this method is to put your cannon right here somewhere in like the middle. And then we want to be standing a little bit left of the center of the room here. So you can see there's these little rocks on the floor. This is kind of what I use as a placement mark. Just stand a little bit, I guess it's like the south. You can see here, like this would be north. So a little bit south, east of these rocks. And the reason that we want to be standing, I think we have to go maybe 2 more tiles over here, but yeah, so we want to be standing a little bit south of the rock and east of the rock. And you can see all of the scarabs are able to attack us. If you're standing, you know, at this rock line or more north of that, the ones that spawn to the south here won't actually attack you. And looks like this one got stuck. So we're just going to pull that one out. Make sure you pull them out. Also, make sure you're not standing in line with this like pillar here, this little rock here, because they can get stuck behind the rock. So yeah, just make sure we are standing in the correct spot. If you see any of them running away from you like that, that means you're not standing in the correct spot. So you can see here, now that they can all attack us, we are standing in the correct spot here. And this is pretty much all we do. And we should be able to get upwards of like 800 or so kills per hour using this method. So as far as the XP from a task like this, you do get about 700 or maybe slightly over 700k XP per hour. So it's a pretty decent Slayer task to be doing, especially for how low level it is. It's nothing too crazy. I mean, you only need a level 87 Slayer, so I think a 700k XP per hour Slayer task at level 87 is pretty good. So yeah, this task is decent for XP. As far as the money is concerned, you know, I don't really know how much these things will stabilize at, but some of the key drops you're going to be going for here are most likely going to be the Dragon Dart tips. These are worth a fair amount here at 4.5k each, and they drop like 30 at a time, as well as the Primal Stone Spirits. These are a really, really nice way to have like fully AFK out Primal Stone Spirits. I believe this is the first monster in the game that has fully AFK Primal Stone Spirits. So that could be pretty nice for you if you're looking to just farm out a bunch of Primal Stone Spirits like off a Slayer task or something like that. Alright guys, so now we're going to be doing our necromancy task. The necromancy task or setup, I guess, is a little bit different than the magic setup. Basically, the only real difference, I guess, is we use our pray melee prayer here, and that's just to be getting, you know, as much protection as we can when we're fighting these things. If you don't use pray melee, you're probably gonna have a bad time and die. So yeah, make sure you're using pray melee with necromancy. It does seem to help quite a bit. But other than that, it's pretty much the exact same setup here. We just go over here and we drop down our cannon and start it up, obviously, and then we step under it. And yeah, that's pretty much the only difference here. Probably want to turn on our God book. But yeah, other than using pray melee, the necromancy setup is very similar. You can see the action bar we use on screen here. Very similar to every other like scythe bar that we use. The only difference is we can use the phantom ability. The phantom ability is pretty good for AFKing from what I found. It can hit very hard on these guys if you can build up a bunch of stacks. And since there's so many guys hitting us here, you're going to be building a lot of stacks anyway, because it's every single hit you take, you generate a stack, and then that gives you more damage when you use the ability. So yeah, you can see here we are targeting pretty much all of them. None of them are getting stuck off in the corners, as you can see. So this is where we want to be standing. Again, like I said, just slightly like behind this little rock here. Yeah, and that's pretty much going to be the necromancy setup. So the necromancy setup is able to get up to 750 kills per hour, which gets you about 675k Slayer XP per hour. So it's pretty decent Slayer XP again for necromancy, especially for such a low level task. It is a good way to get your Slayer Mask upgrade, because upgrading your Slayer Mask is going to help you out a ton with necromancy tasks. So yeah, hopefully you guys like this necromancy method, and just keep in mind, you can always be downgrading your gear and using something like darkness if you don't have the Raziel gear. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully this video helps you guys get your Slayer Mask upgrade or get some decent low level Slayer XP. If you guys did make it this far in the video, definitely drop a like on it. It does help promote the channel. And as always, guys, I will see you in the next one.